Hi, and welcome to the third part of the Using Web Services in AL series. Hi, my name is Eric, and in this part we're going to look at the return values and make our little solution here something that is actually more of a real product or solution. So I was looking at this and trying to figure out what to put in this video, and no matter how I structured it, would end up being mostly me just typing and typing and typing. And even though that's entertaining, perhaps we should try something, a version where I have pre-typed stuff. So that's how this episode is gonna play out. So let's get right into it. Here is my Visual Studio. This is where we left off the last time. We had a great function called call web service, and the call web service, if you remember, would get a XML in and return an XML out. And we spent some time building in the last episode, building these great functions, the great function, how to add a field, so we could basically build the XML structure neatly. So now we need to go the other way. When we had a function, and I'm going to scroll up to the top now, we had a function called verify customer address that did all. What I have done now is that I have introduced a new table. Actually, I have introduced that's actually not it. This is it. Yeah. So I have introduced a new table called the US Postal Service Address Verify. And this table is kind of meant as the middle layer. So we are going to fill it out with information about the customer or vendor or what else we want to verify the address on. And then we're going to run the web service and fill out US Postal Service fields, and then we can compare the two things and show it in a UI. So right now this table has a bunch of fields. So the primary key is a enum called US Postal Service Verified Type. And right now, customer and vendors, we could add resources and employees and anything else that has an address. For that sake, we could also think about verifying addresses on documents, shipping addresses, and stuff like that, where users would manually enter an address. So now we're prepared. And we have said that this type can be extended, so potentially we could add an extension to this at some point. Let me go back to the table. Hang on. Here's the table. So we got a bunch of fields that are the input field: name, address, address to, city, postcode, county. So these are the fields that we want to send to the US Postal Service. And then the fields number starting with 100, that's the fields that we're getting back from US Postal Service. So with that in mind, let's take a look again at the first function, the verify customer address function, the function that we're calling from the customer UI. And in the previous episode, this was just all in one. So what I've done now is that this will start by figuring out, do we have a address, I call it compare rec here, the address verify record for this customer. If not, we'll create a new one. So if we cannot find it, then init a new, add in the two primary key fields and insert. I put insert true, even though if we looked at the table, there are no triggers at all. But in case that we add a trigger in the future, there's nothing here that would indicate that we do not want a future trigger to run. So I set it to true. Then I take the address fields from the customer record and add into the address verify record here. When that is done, then I call a new function, actually a complete new function. So the prepare XML takes the compare rec and the setup, because there's no reason that we get the setup twice. And if we look at this, then we can actually see that the code that we had in the last episode is sitting here. So this is the code that built the XML from the last time, the add field and create the address validate request structure and so on. And at the end of it, it will call the web service, just as we did the last time. So this is basically the code that we had in the custom function the last time, moved into this new function. The reason for this is, of course, that this is now a generic function that just takes a compare rec and the setup. So creating a version of the verified customer address that will work on another record, not the customer, is quite easy, because there's more or less just a copy of this function. So if we then look, so basically this is where we ended at the last time. So call web service, we got a result XML back, and then what should we do with that? So there are actually two different types of results that I have observed that we can get back. One is that we actually get a result back, as we showed in the last episode, or that we get an error. And the XML structure for an error looks like this. And you can already see down here that below that I have created a function called getField from the result, and with a path into the XML. So let's take a look at that for a second. So let's take a look at getField, because that's quite interesting actually. So getField takes an XML document and a path. So what is the path? The path is also sometimes called the XPath, because that's the XML path. So the path is a way to address something inside an XML document. And in this case, we can use the select single node function with that path inside the XML. And if this returns true, then we have that XML node that we're asking for in the variable n. And we can say that n dot as an element, because the thing we are getting could be all sorts of things, but in this case we want to type the name of an element and give us the inner text of that element. So if we look at the XML, in this case address 1 and then a value, then a value. So we want to get this one and find this one, and then we want to get the inner value. So in that case, the path is address. Let's see if we can get this on screen all at once. This is pretty close. So it's address validate response. Then it's the first address segment, whatever we call it, we get, and inside that it's address 1. So the XPath will be address validate response / address, and the first one in case there are multiple entities, and then address 1. That will give us that. So the getField function will simply return the value from inside the XML with that path. Since we're only, in this case, you can see getting the 8 fields out of the structure. It's just 8 fields, and the first one here is if we got an error. I want the error description shown, so we will use the path for the address. If you had an XML with hundreds of thousands of fields, the absolute addressing into the XML for every single field is not very performance friendly. It takes a lot of resources to do. So it's only a trick that you are allowed to perform in something that's like in these so tiny XML structures that we're working with here. Otherwise, you need to pass them in a whole different way. And let me know in the comments below if that's a video you want to see. So the first thing I'm doing is that I'm looking to see, do we have a value in the address one arrow description? If that's the case, then we throw an error and saying, hey, this didn't work. Otherwise, I fill out the fields from the XML into our new record. And when we're done with that, we return back to this one. We modify the record so we have it. We commit because now we actually want to show the user something. So I also added, the third thing I added was a simple page right now. Just a very, very simple page. 2 groups, Business Central fields, US Postal Service fields. And I probably actually need to make this not editable, otherwise it will become strange. So with that in mind, let's actually see how this looks. So let's hit F5. And I'm running against my usual Docker container. Let me start by actually going into our test customer here and remove Florida and the postal code. So this is really a bad address. And let's try where did we put it? We put it here. Let's try the verify address. Oops, let me right click. And we can see that the debugger we got a break here on the arrow. That's excellent. So let's just continue that, switch back to our browser. So US Postal Server returned an error, invalid state code. That means that our passing, our parser, that's my crazy accent. You have to deal with that because it's not gonna be any better. Our parser figured out that there was an error, and we found this field, so we showed the invalid state code. Okay, that's excellent. Let's try and restore some level of sanity to this address. We put them back in Florida and give them the only postal code in the US I remember. And let's try again to see. So now hopefully no errors, and we should get a dialog. Bam, that was fast. So this is our compare address functionality. And we have the 2 sections. So these are the fields that we are sending into US Postal Service. These are the fields we're sending back. So one option now would be that let's actually do one thing. So let's add a apply address functionality here. So we'll go back into Visual Studio Code, and on the new page, let's go and add an action. So we'll do that in the action section, and this is in the processing area. And it's a new action called apply. Whoa, that was caption apply US Postal Service address. Image, let's see if we have images. Well, there's an image called apply. How about that? Oh, easy. That's an arrow. We can use that. And we need to add a tooltip, because otherwise when we at some point turn on all the fancy code analytics stuff, we need to have a tooltip, otherwise it will tell us that we're missing tooltips. So apply the fields from US Postal Service to the Business Central entity, because it might not be just a customer, right? And we need the application area, because we always need the application area. And then let's create a trigger. So on action trigger, and we probably need a function. So let's actually go back to our management code unit for a second here and create a procedure called apply address. And in this case, we're getting, I'm still calling a compare rec. Wow. And I told you guys that I was not going to create code in this episode, but hey, here we are creating code. Okay, so let's create a variable management code unit, US Postal Service management. Do we want to confirm or we just want to do it? Let's try confirm. Update. And we actually know what it is. So we can say update %1, %2 with US Postal Service address. And default is true is fine. So %1 would then be reg.type and %2 would be reg.name. If that's the case, then management apply address reg. How about that? And since we're applying it, then we should actually probably close this window, because why do we want to see it if so current page close. We're done with this. Okay, let's get into this one for a second. The apply function. Here. So the first thing we need to do is say case compare reg.type of compare reg.type colon customer, and then we can always do the rest of them at another time. So we need a customer variable, I guess. Customer.get compare reg.number, and customer.name. No, actually, since this is, let's validate it. So compare reg.US Postal Service firm name. Customer validate address, compare reg.US Postal Service address 1. We can copy this one fairly quickly. So we handle address 2 with address 2, and customer.validate city with compare reg.US Postal Service city, and I know I had some uppercasing that went wrong. So postcode with compare reg US, and this is then zip5, right? And customer validate, wow, validate county with a U with the compare reg dot. Oh, now I'm typing all sorts of crazy stuff. That would be the US Postal Service state. And customer.modify, wow, modify true, because there might be people who want to be in on this. And I guess that's it. Let's compile it. It works. So, moment of truth. Let's see if any of this worked. Okay, so let's just look at our customer here for a second. And we're still in winter parking, and we have the address in one field, and yeah. So let's try verify address. We got it. So you know this is right, but it's also wrong, because why do I need to hit action? So let's actually improve that action thing so it looks way nicer. This one. So let's promote it. And the promote category is process, promoted is big, and promoted only true. So what I did was basically saying that instead of this one going under the action menu inside the action bar, I just want it out on the bar by itself. So now we just have apply US Postal Server address here directly. So the challenge is that sometimes it's the UI. I'm not gonna. The problem is that sometimes it's not really obvious for users that the actions to do something is up in the upper left corner and not the lower right corner, which they're used to in a lot of other dialogues. So you have to make it as obvious and as visible as possible. So in this case, and I'm just gonna, I'm gonna move myself for a second here because all the important stuff were right under me. So you can see that we, instead of winter parking, we have the right city. And this is also bad UI. The postcodes first and then the county, and here we have the county, the state, the same field before the postcode. So that's kind of bad UI. We could improve that, but I guess that's for the next video. So I'm just, before I forget myself, hang on, that's not where the mouse is. I'm gonna put myself back here. And then let's hit the apply function. Update, that was our question. Update customer, tab US Incorporated. Yes, please. The window closed, we asked for that. Let's check the address here. And bam, it's updated. So now this is beginning to look like something that is useful. So I think let's repeat what we did here, and especially what I did before the video, in order not to have you guys just sitting and looking at me typing all the time. We split the, let's go into the code unit. We split the verify custom address function into two. So and interjected a new record that would kind of hold the comparison for us. So the what was left in the verify custom address function was basically putting the fields into this new table, and then calling the second function prepare XML. That one took our old XML generation code and called the web service and all that. And then the function also took the result and put into the same table on different fields, and we added a UI so we can show the difference. Let's actually, while we remember it, change the sorting here because, hey, that's nicer. We showed the UI, and then finally we created a new function to apply the result to the entity that we were working on. So now we're ready to to finish up all the rough edges. If we want to support vendors, we have to create a case for the vendors and a prepare vendor address and a verify vendor address function and so on. All that we'll do in the next episode, and also kind of look at turning on all the code analyzers and see if our code needs beautifying and stuff like that. My hope is that the end product of this series, I don't know how many episodes it's going to be, will be something that we, in one episode, let's see if we can submit it to AppSource. So anyway, thanks for following along in this series. I hope this episode was not too much talking and too little typing. Follow me on Twitter. Let me know what you think about the video in the comments below. Make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. That helps a lot and keeps in touch. So until next time, have a wonderful day.